Welcome to Devils in Red 59. My name is Steve, and today is Sunday. Um, no more excuses in INEOS. That's the topic of conversation today. Um, I'd just like to thank everybody before we start then for the views on the last video. Thank you very much for the likes and the views on it, and obviously the shared videos. It all means a lot. But we'll get into the news today about no more excuses in INEOS. Obviously, that was a terrible game yesterday. I mean, we should have gone there. I mean, I know Sunderland is still in a situation that they can qualify for some sort of European football. But realistically, I mean, we should have gone there and put a performance on. You know, we should have got the 3 points based on the fact that they lost 5-0 last week to Nottingham Forest. You know, another lower half club. That's capable of going there and getting a result, and we sit in third, and we look like we're fighting relegation. You know, it's not good enough. INEOS have got to take responsibility for it. um, I mean, the team was absolutely atrocious. I mean, just to say that Xerxes was in place of Sesko, and Mbumu was on the bench, and there was no Casemiro, it shouldn't have made that much difference to a team performance. I mean, the likes of Xerxes and Mount that came into the side. I mean, we know that Mount's quite injury prone, but he hasn't played for at least a couple of months. Xerxes, I mean, he hasn't started at all very much this second half of the season. So these players should be fresh anyway, and they're in training every day. You know, the money they get paid, they should have been on there. They should have been able to perform. They can't just start using excuses like, oh, Casemiro wasn't in the side and Xerxes wasn't in the side. These are professional football players, and the players that want to be playing for the national teams in the World Cup. But realistically, I wouldn't give some of them the time of day and even put them in a conference side, because that would be insulting some of the conference sides that go out week in, week out and put in a good style and a good performance for their teams and clubs. So realistically, INEOS have got to take responsibility for this. It's by nowhere near what we would expect as fans. Ideally, I mean, you look at that side yesterday and you can quite easily say that we need to bring in a left back for certain. We need to bring in a right back, because our left and right backs, they don't go forward enough, which allows a team to push up and help put the pressure on sides. So we definitely need a left back and a right back. I know the likes of Mazraoui and Dallo that normally play on the right, they can play in other positions. And in all fairness to Dallo, I mean, when he plays, he does go forward more so than Mazraoui and Luke Shaw. But as I say, Dallo, he can play on the left, he can play on the right, and he's probably the better of the three at this moment in time. I know that Mazraoui, prior to the African nations, he was doing quite well, but he seems to have dropped off. Whether that's through lack of game time since he's come back from the African nations or not, I don't know. But certainly our left and right backs are not pushing forward the way you would expect them to do. And you look at other sides that play similar formations, and I mean their left back and right backs are constantly going forward, supporting the left and right wingers and putting the pressure on the opposition. So that's, we don't expect anything any less from Manchester United. Obviously, Harry Maguire, he didn't have a very good game again. Martinez was only just coming back in from a 3-match ban. But again, he was fresh. He should have been fit enough, because he's been in training every day, albeit he hasn't played in the last 3 games. And again, to me, it's not good enough. The players look like they just didn't want to be there. They didn't want to perform, and they didn't want to play. You could see it on the faces. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. Um, The only person really that justified his wage yesterday, as far as I'm concerned, is Le Mans. And if it hadn't have been for Le Mans, we we would have lost that game without a shadow of a doubt. If we'd have had Bayern in there or Nana if he was still here, I mean, we would have most certainly lost that game. So we were very, very lucky in many respects that Le Mans was on his day and he stopped Sunderland from scoring because Sunderland are not a side that score very many goals in anyway. But obviously, if we'd have had Bayern or Nana in the goal, I think they would have, got those goals. So full credit to Le Mans yesterday. For me, he was the man of the match. But he didn't realistically have many contenders anyway. But as I say, we definitely need a left back. We definitely need a right back. We need another centre half because obviously the legs on Maguire. I know he's good in both boxes. You can't take that away from him, and he does make some nice passes from his own half, moving it forward. But when he presses forward and then he's got to get back, you could tell his legs aren't as good as they used to be. Martinez as well. I mean, yes, he's a good player, but at times, you have to look at him and think, well, you haven't got the speed either that we'd like. Um, and obviously, there has been talk over the last few days that Martinez might be on his way out. So again, we need a fullback that can come in, hit the ground running, and he's got the speed as well, so that when the team's pressing forward, if somebody's got to get back, that centre half needs to have that speed to get back. I know Delete when he's fit and playing, prior to his injury, you couldn't fault him, and he has got the speed. But you need more than one. I mean, in my opinion, I would have still played Heaven yesterday because he is fast, and in the last few games that he's been covering for Martinez, he hasn't put a foot wrong, and for the money we paid for him, I'm sure there's a lot more players like him out there. We need to find them and we need to bring them in. So that's the defence is flying realistically. I think INEOS need to bring in a left back, right back, and a centre half minimum. Then obviously from the midfield point of things, I mean to say Casemiro was out and it only left us with Mainu. Mason Mount was put to team up with Mainu in the midfield, but he's not realistically a midfielder. So Ugarte was injured, and I don't think other than desperation, if Ugarte had been fit, he would have played anyway. So we need a minimum of three quality midfield players. So if you got one out injured, one suspended, you've still got two decent ones that's on the pitch on a week-to-week basis, especially with two games a week coming up. So, as I say, there's six players there so far that we need, and we most certainly need a left winger as well. I mean, I know there's talk of Rashford coming back, but realistically, I wouldn't want Rashford back. There's too much baggage with it, and I think he's had his day at Manchester United, and he quite clearly wants to be at Barcelona with all the noise that's coming out, and Barcelona are playing silly buggers over the price. But you know, if Barcelona don't stump up with the money, then realistically, we've either got to loan him again to Barcelona for another year, which I don't see why we should do. They've had the benefit of him for 12 months on loan already. So it's either a loan again or we've got to find another club for him. But obviously, his wages are always going to be a problem. He's prepared to reduce his wages in order to get a contract with Barcelona, but you could bet your bottom dollar that if United stand the ground and say, well, no, we're not going to accept what they want, we're going to find you another club, then he won't go to these other clubs because he'll revert back then and say he's not prepared to reduce his wages, and that's what we're up against all the time with players of this type of character, and we've got to make sure moving forward that when we bring players in, A, they're on the right wage and contracts, and B, they've got the right mentality to play for Manchester United, and they're going to put a shift in every game, not just every now and again when it suits them. So, that's another position that we most definitely need, but I can't see us doing a left winger until they know they've sorted out what Marcus Rashford's situation is going to be, whether he's effectively still here or whether he is doing a deal with Barcelona. And then, obviously, from the striker point of view, again, yesterday with Sesko being out, um, we we had to play a situation where we put Xerxes on, and I'm sorry, but for many a people for many a months now have been saying that Xerxes is not a striker, and he's quite clearly not. He's a number 10, but even as a number 10, I just don't think he fits in with the British Premiership. I don't think he's got it in him to play in the Premiership. He may well be suited going back to the likes of Italy or Spain or a lower club in the German league or something like that. He may well do quite well in those type of clubs, but I just don't think he's suited at all to the British Premiership, and that's not taking nothing away from Xerxes. I mean, we had an interest in him enough in the first place to buy him, but he hasn't worked out, and it's time to get rid. We can't just hang on to players because they're liked in the club, and the players get on well with him and so forth. Sentiments got to go out the window. Because if we want to build successful side, then obviously we need to be harsh on our decisions. Barada said last season that if somebody ain't made it within 2 years of signing them, they've got to go. And I'm afraid for me, Xerxes had his 2 years. I know some of it's down to the fact that he hasn't had a lot of game time under certain managers, but it is what he is, and he's got to go. And I know with Mason Mount, he's another one. We can't just keep him at the club because players like him and the board like him and so forth. He's on ridiculous wages, £250,000 a week for the games he plays. And Mount, like Xerxes, they're probably very nice guys. I don't want to take nothing away from them in that respect, but £250,000 a week, you could pretty much bring in Tonali, I would have thought, on a wage like that, that's going to perform week in, week out for us, and he's going to push us to the next level. So, it's time for Manchester United, if they've got to find a way of moving these type of players on and getting them off the books. So, he's got to go, and we've got to look for another number 9. Whether that number 9 that potentially comes in will be the main starter, he'll be somebody that Sesko can learn off, or whether it'll be somebody that comes in that can challenge Xerxes for sorry, not Xerxes, Sesko for the number 1 starting position. So, there's 8 players there realistically, and with all the cutbacks that INEOS have made since they've took over the ball inside at Manchester United, the redundancies, the cutbacks on staff in general, with like the staff meals that was cut back. Only the first team could have meals there and so forth. Um, Cutbacks on money they were giving to charity, ticket price rises, shirts and merchandise. It's gone up. You know, we've got to find that money. I doubt very much whether we'll bring the 8 in, but that's, in my opinion, what we need in order to put us in a position for next season to be challenging in the cup competitions as well as the league and also the Champions League. I doubt very much whether, we're going to go too far in the Champions League based on things at the moment, but if we can bring the right players in, it would be nice to think that we could get to maybe a quarter final at least, which will give us another financial boost for the following year. And then obviously we've got to make sure that we get in that top 4 or 5 in the Premiership again next year, to make sure that we stay in the Champions League and it's not just a one-off. And obviously we need to have a good run in the cup games as well, because again, that's obviously extra revenue. So as I say, in my opinion, we need a minimum of 8 players. Whether INEOS look at it and look at some of the free transfers that's going to be available on the market. I mean, I know there's apparently 1 or 2 from Bournemouth that are decent players that are apparently on a free at the end of this season. So, there's no reason realistically, when you look at the rest of the league and Europe and so forth, there's going to be other decent players that's on frees from various clubs as well. So, if INEOS actually lay out for 4 or 5 financially, there's no reason why they can't bring in another 2 or 3 players from other clubs that's on frees. So, I don't think INEOS have got an excuse this time, and the eyes will be on INEOS to see what they do. Some reports say they're going to have a very, very big summer. Other reports say, it's going to be a limited budget and we're only going to bring in up to 4 players, and as I already said, that's not good enough. INEOS has been here for 2 years now. They've made a lot of cutbacks. They've made a lot of reduction of wages on players coming in. They've got rid of players that were on big wages. So, with the ticket prices and everything else as well, we should have sufficient money to bring in at least 5, and then hopefully we can look at bringing in 2 or 3 players on a free from other clubs that's available, because I'm sure, that they are there and they'll be quality players that we can bring in that can do a job for us for maybe 3 or 4 years and build from that. So, INEOS, we are watching you as fans. You are being watched across the globe. So this is going to be down to you this summer to make sure that you deliver what this club requires, because if you don't, then there's going to be all sorts of problems in the fan base. In reference to Michael Carrick, you can blame him to a degree for the performance yesterday, but obviously, as we've said on previous videos and other people on other platforms have said time after time, he's got to work with what he's got. They're not his players. He hasn't had a transfer window. Some fans are still quite strong on giving him the job and ex-players, and there's fans and other ex-players that saying he shouldn't get the job. But what will be will be. If Carrick does get the job, which I think he will, he's got to be backed by INEOS, because INEOS cannot bring in another manager and then end up sacking that manager and trying to move the blame onto him. The blame this time will be on INEOS, because they're the ones that have got to sort the money out. They're the ones that have got to bring the right players in. So, as I say, INEOS, we are watching you and you need to deliver this summer. But I'd just like to thank everybody for watching all the previous videos. So please smash a like on the video, get in the comments, share the video, and please subscribe as well. So thank you very much. All stay safe, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.